going to have to be a 501c3 in most cases to get government grants if you're not a government entity or other kinds. So if you haven't done that yet, I'm going to recommend several times during this presentation the Southeast Texas Nonprofit Development Center. It's setxnonprofit.org. Or you can talk to Mary Young, who is our interim director, and she is here today. So please feel free to call her. And there is actually a flyer that Christy can send out to everybody. She already has this information, so you'll get that. The next point is, what is your history with government or other grants? For your organization, what is your history? Have you gotten grants in the past? How have you done with those grants? That's something that you're probably going to have to write about in the application, but it's very important to know, has this ever been done before in the organization that you're working with? The next thing is, are you registered with all the necessary agencies? There's a lot of steps to getting a government grant. I've included, and Christy will email out to you, a whole 61-page thing that Grants.gov puts out. So it'll be everything from getting your DUNS number to registering with Grants.gov. There's a lot of steps that have to take place before you do a government grant, especially at the federal level. State is a little bit different, local is a little bit different. But those are it's step-by-step instructions. I didn't write it, Grants.gov did. And you can search this out on the web as well. And they even have presentations that they do online that you can sign up for free. It's really easy. The next question you need to ask yourself is, do you have the financial infrastructure to track every penny and report on it? The government doesn't mess around with their money, so you need to be able to track all of this. We don't even do this through our foundation. It goes through our hospital accounting department because they have the ability to track this. We do everything that comes into the government grant in one line item, and we make all of our expenditures. You do not want to mix this money with other money. It can get you in lots and lots of trouble. And they do not play around about that. Is your leadership and board supportive of government grant funding? You need to make sure that everyone's on board before you even start down this path. Some organizations don't want to take government money for whatever reason. They're in their charter or something, they're opposed to doing this. So make sure that you have everyone's support, because it's going to take the entire team. Most nonprofits are small, so it's going to take everybody working together to get these grant documents that you need prepared and submitted on time. They don't play around about that either. You've got to have everything in on time in the right format, usually online. So make sure that you start way, way early. I may say that 2 or 3 times, but it's really important. And then, what are the needs in the community that we are trying to accomplish? You have to have a need that you're trying to help. What problem are you trying to solve? Ask yourself that first. And then, who are our potential partners? Christy already mentioned it. I'm sure Sade will mention it. Who you work with is very, very important. Almost no one wants to fund just a single organization anymore. You have to have, at the least, letters of support, but oftentimes you need collaboration. They don't want to see one group just going off and doing something by itself. They want to see all these groups coming together to solve a problem. So that's who your potential partners are. And talk to them beforehand. Do not put them in a grant until you've spoken with them and made sure you get a commitment from them that they will participate. Okay, now that you know all these things, you need to start researching available opportunities. Work with any professional associations that you have specific to your field to learn about out grant opportunities. A lot of times you can find out things even before they come out. Being a hospital and a hospital foundation, we find out things from Texas Hospital Association, American Hospital Association. You read those things that come out, their advocacy groups will tell you, oh, in a few months this is going to come out. So that is really important. Local governments and municipalities, if you're trying for a grant there, talk to the people that can help you. Maybe it's Cdbg, maybe it's another group, but talk to them and try to find out as soon as that information is posted, you're going to want to know this. State agencies. In Texas, you may or may not know this, much of our state funding is called pass-through funding. That means it is federal money and that comes down through the state. So not only are you going to have all the state regulations on this money, you're going to have all the federal regulations of how this money can be used. There is kind of a hint here. You can look at Grants.gov and find out there's often competitions that are just for states, and you can see, oh, this is a maternal health grant, but it's only for states. Take a clue from that, because Texas will probably apply, and then in a few more months, you may be able to apply to the state of Texas if that is what you want to do. But read all the criteria, everything they want to do, because oftentimes when something is posted from the state or from the federal government, you don't have very long to get that application in. I've seen it as short as 30 days, sometimes it's longer, but be prepared as much as possible. Look at Grants.gov in areas that you are interested in and be prepared ahead of time. So it's kind of like getting the answers to the test early. And Grants.gov. As I told you earlier, there is a whole presentation that Christy will email out that is on Grants.gov. It's very complicated, but they have step-by-step instructions. If you do everything step-by-step, it'll just walk you through how to do it. There's also assistance. You can email, you can call, and they will help you walk through the process. Do that early. Get registered with them before you ever want to apply for a grant. It's very important. Then you'll have everything you need when you start to apply. Okay, once you find an opportunity, assess your readiness. Do we qualify for this grant? They're going to give you the answers right up front. You read their NOFO or their RFA very carefully. See if you are qualified. If you are not, if they don't give this to nonprofits, do not apply. You have to check all those boxes. The next thing is this a fit for your organization's mission? Is this what you do? Do not start chasing money. And this is a huge temptation for nonprofits. We are so underfunded that we think, oh, that's kind of like what we do. Maybe we could do that. Well, that really isn't a good idea, because you're changing your mission for just chasing money. There may be somebody else that's doing that. You may do something in partnership, but don't just chase money. It's not a good idea. The next question is, can we meet the required match? Often in government funding, it's a 75 federal, 25 local, 80 federal, 20% local. You have to make sure that you can meet whatever that match requirement is. If you don't have that money, you can't get that grant. So know that beforehand before you spend hours and hours writing and researching. You may just have to give it all back. The next thing is, they don't usually just send you a check. What happens with government grants is often they expect you to expend the money and then bill them. And you have to have the invoice, you have to have the check, you have to have everything to turn around and bill them. So you've got to have a little bit of capital to be able to do these expenses don't have to wait till the grant is over. You usually bill monthly or quarterly. So you don't have to expend that whole thing, but you do have to have enough working capital to make this work. If we receive the funding, are the program goals achievable? Can we achieve what we're setting out to do? Are these goals so lofty that we can't possibly do them? I mean, that's another question to really sit down and think about. Sometimes you have to narrow your focus to just solving one problem. I mean, we'd all like to go out and solve all the problems in the world, but to be successful in government grant writing, you have to narrow down what you want to do. So, to something that we can achieve. Can you achieve these? And can you achieve them in the timeline? It may be a year, it may be 2 years, it may be 3, but you need to have goals, and then you need to have milestones. Break them up along the way. What do we need to hit? When do we need to hit it? If you don't hit those, you're going to have to explain to the funder why you didn't and how you feel like you can change that, change the grant to do that. The next thing is, do we have data gathering and reporting capacity required? Who's going to collect the data? How's it going to be done? Government grants survive on data. They want to know, did you make a difference? And they don't just want to know how many people did you serve. That's important, but they want to know what impacted them. And that is sometimes harder to capture. So get your head around, how are we going to capture this data? Who is going to be responsible for it? And how do we need to report it? The next question is the program sustainable beyond the grant period? This is in almost every grant I've ever written. How about you, Kristen? Yeah, it's always there. How are you going to take the program that you start, and when the government money runs out, how are you going to continue? Because no government, no nonprofit wants, or foundation wants to fund forever. They want to get you started and then get you going, and you're supposed to figure out how you continue this. Is it going to be through some sort of billing? Is it going to be through other grants? What can you depend on to take this further? The next question is, do we have the personnel and time required to write this grant, or do we need to hire a grant writer or consultant? This may seem like a panacea. Oh, we're just going to hire somebody to do it. You're still going to have to put together all the information for the grant writer. They may know the formula, they may know how to fill out the forms, but everyone is going to have to contribute. You're still going to have to do all this reporting afterwards. So having a grant consultant can be really good. It can be a great guide. There may be some available who've done these grants before, which is a great help. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to tell them about your organization, what you want to do, and you're still going to be responsible for the financial reporting and all this other reporting. If all the questions that we've asked so far are yes, then you may be ready to do a government grant. Keys about writing is start as early as possible. If you can figure out a grant is coming down before it is by looking at that Grants.gov, start writing. Start trying to figure out what your program is going to look like. That is extremely important. Be specific. When I'm writing a foundation grant, I'm specific, but a lot of what they want to hear are stories. They want to know the impact of this on a person's life. That is true in the government grant too, but they're going to want data to back everything up. That can be true in foundations, but it's not necessary. You have to have the data. So be very specific in what you think you can meet, and don't forget how you're going to measure this. Don't assume when they're reading this, they know anything about you or your organization. It's usually a group of people that the funder finds that are from similar sorts of backgrounds. You know, they may be in healthcare, but they may not know anything about our hospital. They don't know anything about Beaumont, Texas. They may not know much about Texas if you're doing a federal grant. So you need to paint a picture. One of the things that I do in nearly every grant I write, especially when it's not going to local, is tell them how big this area is. The area our hospital, and actually both hospitals, or all the hospitals serve, is about an 8-county area. If you're from back east, you don't understand that that's almost the size of the state of Delaware. People have to come from far away to get here. Their concept may be totally different. If you live in Rhode Island, you can be in another state in about 15 minutes. That's not the way it is in Texas. So you have to paint a picture of the region. Our ethnic mix is different. We do not look like El Paso, and you need to make that very clear in the grant. Our problems are different. We have a big industrial complex. There's a lot of things that you need to talk about in those grants that paint a picture of what Beaumont, Texas, or anywhere in Jefferson County, Orange County, wherever you're from around the region, what is your specific area's needs? Is it transportation? Are you in a rural area and people can't get to you? What are your needs that might be different than, say, if you're in California? Their needs are different. So paint a picture and really kind of assume they know nothing, because most of the time they don't. Double check your budget. One thing that can get your grant thrown out in just a heartbeat is if your budget numbers are not adding up right, if it's incorrect, if it's not logical. We have 12 patients for this much money for this, many sessions. Make it very easy for them to figure out where your budget numbers are coming from. You've got to paint the full picture. And remember, these people, just because they're in government, are still people. Reach out to the funder. Give them a call. I mean, the only time they won't really answer your questions is after the RFA is out, and they may have to refer you to frequently asked questions. Most of the time, state, federal, local, will talk to you and say, okay, well, you give them the concept, and they may say, oh, that's not a fit for what we do. Or they may say, our focus is economic development. You may want to write your grant this way to reflect this. They can't be real specific, but they can definitely tell you what works for their agency. It helps them. They don't want to read a bunch of grant applications that don't qualify. That is very important to them, that what you're doing, they want you to be successful. They want to give away the money. It's been allocated. They need to give it away. So make sure that you talk to them. Getting a relationship with those folks is very important, and they're very friendly, and a lot of people are just scared to call. So if you call them up, you're ahead of the game. The last thing on writing is to submit early. Don't wait till the last minute. I have seen people wait till the last minute, and some little glitch on the website after they've worked for months on their grant keeps them from getting in on time. If you don't get these government grants in on time, they cannot break the rules for you. So they don't care that we've had a hurricane and you can't submit your stuff. Submit early. Always submit early. Then if there's a problem, we'll have time to solve it. Okay, typical parts of a grant. So once you start writing, the executive summary is exactly what it sounds like. I always do this after I write the full grant. So after you get everything, boil it down to the most salient points that speak to what they want to do. Organization description, write this ahead of time. We have a standard description of what we do. We've been around so many years, we serve this population, these counties, do this much care for low income. Find out everything you can about the organization, and you do not have to wait until you have a grant opportunity. Write this ahead of time. Statement of need. I cannot tell you how much this needs to be based upon data. And there are a lot of data sources out there. The hospital always does a community needs assessment. It's part of our 990. We have to. And OR has good data. You may be able to find data there. You have your own data about people who use your services. Try to find as many data sources as possible that support what you do. The U.S. Census Bureau, that's a great place to start. You can find out how many people there are in the community. You can find out poverty levels. You can find out ethnicity. Everything is there for the taking. It's all free. Just go on and do your research. And you can do that also ahead of time. If you know what area you're going to serve, it's just like we talked about our area being the size of the state of Delaware. That's because I added up all the square miles in the counties. You can do that way ahead of time. Have all of this ready. Have a grant file ready that you can just pull these things out of. So if you have 3 opportunities that come out at once, you can still write for that. So when you do your needs, obviously base that on all this data. Project narrative. This is where you get to paint a picture of how you will accomplish your goals. How do you plan to solve this problem? Is it hunger? Is it medical need? Is it some other kind of need? Education? How are you going to reach a certain population and make a difference? I mean, that's what nonprofits do every day, right? We make a difference. So how are you going to do that and really paint a picture of that? The next thing is your goals and objectives. Lay out very clear goals and objectives and break these down as much as possible. When you break down your goals and objectives, you will get a timeline of what do we need to do by then? What do we need to do by then? How many people do we need to reach a month to get to this number that we say that we're going to have at the end of the grant? And when you get the grant, if you get the grant, then you'll know if you're being successful all the way along. Hey, we had to reach 100 patients this month and we only had 60. So what do we have to do to get to our number? We may have to change our marketing. We may have to change, we may have to reach out to other groups to tell them that we have this service. But you will know if you're on track to meet your goals, which the funding agency will expect. Personnel. Anyone working on the grant, not only the ones being paid through the grant, are counted as your personnel. And it's really good to put them in because a lot of times they count as match, right? So, say you have employee X that makes $100,000 a year and employee Y that makes $100,000 a year. They're both going to work on the grant. There's usually a percentage of time that they will work on the grant. But one may balance out the other and give you some match. That's very important. Even if the grant does not require match, they like match. They like to see that you are putting something of your own money, your own resources into this grant. Sometimes match can be in kind. That would be in kind. You may be using your facility. That's in kind. You're doing grant activities that they are paid for in a facility that you own and pay for. You pay for the phones, you pay for the building, you pay for the paper. Try to capture all that. That's going to make a difference in your budget. And then when you do personnel, obviously, look at people. Timeline. That can kind of go along with your goals and objectives. What do you have to do when? And how will you know if it's working? Your budget, I think we've already covered that fairly well. Just be able to capture all of that and, like I said earlier, make sure that that money is kept separate from any other monies that you want to use or are part of your thing. Government grants have specific forms that you must use, and they have word limits. After that, they just cut you off. You're usually doing these in a grant portal that it's a computer. It's not like they'll let you do more than that. So be very succinct with what you're doing, and just submit, what they ask you to do. A lot of this is about checking boxes and following rules. Okay, so there's a lot of portals. There's state portals and there's federal portals. And after you receive your grant award, we hope all of you receive lots of grant awards because we need as much money in this area as we can, and there's a lot of it out there right now. Make sure all your reporting mechanisms are set up and there are individuals responsible and cross-trained for reporting. Just pretend that you might get hit by a train next week. And nobody knows anything about this grant but you. How can that problem be solved? It's a little more difficult if you're a small shop of 1 or 2 people. But you need somebody that knows how to report, what's expected. Your board will be on the line about this grant. I mean, they're fiscally responsible for your organization, and they're going to depend on you not to put them in jeopardy. So make sure other people in the organization know and that you have a good reporting plan, just in case something were to happen and you aren't there to do the reporting on this. And remember that government grants can audit anytime, during the grant, after the grant, years after the grant. FEMA's really good at doing this. Showing up, you know, oh, we need to audit Hurricane Ida. I wasn't even there in Hurricane Ida, but the records better be. And they better be perfect or they can take back money they gave you years ago. So I hope this has been helpful.
Good morning. My name is Sade Chick. I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs for the Port of Beaumont. And part of my job, my favorite part of my job, is writing grants for the Port. And since I started around 2.5 years ago, we've received a little over 30 million in grants. So I'm going to share with you some of the tips, some of the tricks, some of the things that I've found to be the most heavily weighted when it comes to your grant application. All right, so you should have this document. Was everyone given this document?
Yes.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go through that, and I'm going to do my best. I thought I have a split screen up, and I thought I'd be able to show both of these documents, but that doesn't seem to be working. Actually, let me share the other document since you have that one in front of you. All right, can you see the template?
Yes.
Okay, so on this first page here, Kim covered a lot of what we're going to talk about very, very well. So you're going to notice that there's some redundancies, and I'll try to skip over those fairly quickly. But the areas that are redundant, it's because they're really important, and it's actually worth noting twice. So when you're getting started, most of you probably have a project in mind. Does anyone in the room have a project they're thinking about submitting an application for a grant form? Show of hands, I can kind of see in. Okay, so some of you have projects in mind. That is great. The first question you're going to ask yourself is, what grant am I applying for? If you're not sure, a really great place to start is Grants.gov. You can search the types of grants, you can look at eligibility requirements, and that's where you're going to find your notices of funding opportunity, or NOFOs. And that is like your Bibles when it comes to grant writing. This is something I feel you should print off. Having a hard copy is really valuable. I know we live in a digital world and it's easy to pull it up, but when you're trying to make sure you're checking a lot of boxes, it's great to have in front of you to highlight the areas that you've completed so you know that everything's been included, especially in your narrative, but also for your attachments. Because the narrative is the meat and potatoes of your application for the grants that I apply for. So that's typically government grants, if you're a local government or a government entity. So that applies to municipalities, counties, ports, different entities like that. So the second question, once you've identified a grant opportunity, is how do I show there's a critical need for this project? And what I mean by that is when you look at the notice of funding opportunity, you're going to see an area that says something along the lines of selection criteria or merit criteria. And those are the key points you're going to want to hit on. Those are the priorities of the agency you're working with. So whether it's Department of Commerce, Department which EPA is under, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, which most of our grants are under because they have some port-specific grants. But Department of Commerce is where there's a lot of funding right now, like through the Economic Development Administration. So for nonprofits, I imagine that's where a lot of your grants are going to come from. So it's Really important to understand their priorities and figure out how your project aligns with their priorities. And sometimes it's not obvious. So, for example, one of the grants we applied for was an $18 million build grant, and we ended up getting it about 2 years ago. But part one project was a great dock replacement project. So the priorities were job creation and rural impact. So a dock doesn't have a huge rural impact if you're looking at it as just the dock structure. And the jobs created directly from it, not that many. But when you look at it a little, like from an outside the box perspective, where does rain usually come from? The Midwest. There's a lot of rural jobs out there, farming jobs that are supported by this project. So when we went and did a benefit cost analysis, which I'll talk a little bit about later, getting that information was imperative in showing the importance of this project, which ultimately led to funding. So you really have to link your project to each priority or the number that they designate. Sometimes they'll say you only have to look at one or two of the priorities to show that it meets their eligibility requirements. So now that you know how to package your project, you're going to start working on your application. And I'm going to go through some of the areas that I tend to focus on. And every grant's different, so if you take away one or two nuggets that you're like, oh, I should focus on that, that's great. And then just get rid of the rest because it may not apply to you. The first thing I do is create an outline of my application based on the requirements detailed in the NOFO. So that's what this document right here is. The NOFO can be up to 54 pages, even longer. They're very, very long. So as I go through it, I highlight the parts that need to be included on my application, including attachments. So you'll have to have your project description, your project location, and you can read through this. I'm not going to go through it all. But it makes it a lot easier when I start putting together my application. And I'll provide this template so you can use it and work from it, because a lot of your funding, or a lot of your agencies that offer grant opportunities, they kind of have the same framework. It's similar. And I provided a version of it in this, but it's not exactly the same. And this is made in Canva, so it's not as functional as a little bit. Canva is another great resource if you want your package to look clean and nice. It's a free graphics trading platform that you can sign up for. So once you have your template, you're going to work through the NOFO and fill in any gaps that you're seeing. And again, the notice of funding opportunity is referred to the NOFO. Next, I write out the priorities of the agency so I can ensure the projects align with the priorities. And again, sometimes you'll have to be creative. And that's when it's really smart to start leaning on people in your organization, because they may have, their brain may work in different ways. And that's what we've found. We bounce ideas off each other and we can figure out how to make that project align. And if it doesn't, it might not be a good fit for you. Next is really important. Create an overview of your MSA's demographics and other key facts. So MSAs are Metropolitan Statistical Area. Ours is Jefferson, Hardin, Orange, and recently added Newton a couple years ago. So you can find a lot of this information on places like setworks.org, which is the Southeast Texas Workforce Solution. I've also included a resources page for you with some links to places I can find information. So like, this may not apply to everyone, but I think I see some city representatives in there. There's a green sprint handbook, and that's used for quantifying emissions benefits, and that's really important if you're applying for like transportation grants and things like that. But there's a lot of great resources in here. I really should have put the full link so you could see where I was sourcing it from, but I shortened them so they're fit on that page. But this is where you get to tell your story and show why there's need in our community. And when you start looking at the demographics, I can also provide you with what we use. So you can use that as a template as well. You'll see that Beaumont has Beaumont for Dr. MSA has one of the highest unemployment rates in the state, second only to McAllen. We're ranked 5 out of 389 in the United States as far as unemployment is concerned. And those numbers, they don't sound good, and they're not, but they're great for grants. And they're great to show the need, because there is a need and people need to understand that, and they understand that with data and facts. So there's some really great places where you can find this information, and I'm happy to share my demographics data with you all if you'd like. Next is have a formal estimate prepared. it's really important when you're going to the federal government that you have a plan and you are a credible source of information and you're not just putting on your application, this will be a $1.5 million project, but I don't have any estimates to back it up. I don't have a solid budget, and it should be around that much, but I'm not sure how to justify those costs. You need to be able to justify all your costs, like Kim said. They're going to make you account for every penny, so it's good to do it on the front end. Otherwise, if you're awarded the grant, you'll have to do it all on the back end, and it'll really extend the timeline for when you get to use those dollars. Just for context, we received an $18 million grant in 2019, and our grant agreement just got signed last week. So we're just getting those funds now, 2 years later, and we had all our ducks in a row. So it's really important to get as much information as you can together on the front end. Next, if you need a benefit cost analysis prepared, get started on that as early as possible, even before you apply for the grant, even before you start looking at grant opportunities if you know your project. Because those can take a long time, especially if they're done well, and they're weighted very heavily in the selection process. So typically, as a rule of thumb, if it's not at least a 1, then it will be considered for a grant. And we use Alberto Marquez at Lamar University. He's wonderful. He has done our grants for years. He's very thorough, and I just can't recommend him highly enough. He's great. Next, these are also heavily weighted. Your letters of support. We go to as many people as possible. We go to end users, we go to people who are in the same industry as us, we go to governmental entities, we go to all of our local supporters and request letters of support. And I'll also give you all a template for that, or actually it'll be an example. So you can see what we've done and then kind of make it your own. And you really need to go to as many people as possible because it shows a broad range of support for your project and community. And so then they kind of lean on that to say, okay, this is needed, and that goes together coupled with your verbiage that links your projects to the priorities, and that makes it a more impactful project. Kim touched on this. Ensure you have the funds available to provide a match if it's required. Typically, from the grants I've applied for, it's a 20% match. So the government will give you 80% of your project costs, and you'll be required to provide 20% of your project costs. But if you look at this right here, one of the merit criteria, leveraging federal funding to attract non-federal sources of infrastructure investment. Part of what that is saying is, how much skin are you willing to put in the game? If you can do more than 20%, do more than 20%. If you can find a private partner or some sort of partner to come in on it with you, look for those opportunities. Next, complete your required, and this probably should have been at the top. You know you're going to apply for a grant, complete your required registrations as soon as you can because you can't submit the application if you don't. So if you don't have your DUNS number, if you're not registered on SAM.gov, and if you're not registered on Grants.gov, you can't submit an application. And that takes about 2 weeks. So you have to plan ahead for that. You need to get all that information ahead of time. And let me tell you, it is not intuitive. You cannot just go on that site and figure it out. It is bananas how hard that site is to figure out. It is my least favorite part of the grant process. Next, submit your grant well ahead of the deadline, like Kim said. Again, there's snafus with that website regularly, especially when the volume increases, which is the last day or two of grant submission. So submit it a week ahead of time if you can, because it won't be accepted if it's not there on time. Familiarize yourself with the platform you'll use to submit the application. They have a lot of training resources, so you're probably going to be going through Grants.gov if you're submitting an application for a federal grant. So you're going to want to go on there way ahead of time, take some of the how-to courses, and it'll teach you how to get on, how to submit your application, and how to do it properly. And then what's really important, so it's great if you receive the grant, but if you don't receive the grant, these opportunities come up annually, most of them. And it's important to reach out to the agency that you submitted the grant with and say, can we schedule a meeting to debrief? Because they'll sit down with you and they'll address the deficiencies in your application. And they'll basically say, our economist looked at your benefit cost analysis and it just wasn't high enough. You might want to address these areas. And maybe it wasn't something you did. Maybe it was something that happened with the BCA where they didn't have all the information they needed to show the true impact of your project. And that does happen. That's happened to us before. So it's really important to debrief in case you want to submit that project again, you know what you can do better next time. And so if you do receive the grant, it's not the end, it's just the beginning. So you have to go through the grant agreement process. And that process, like I was saying, can take up to 2 years. And we are at the 2-year mark with one of our grants. Some of them will walk through them. DOT historically has moved a little more slowly. The Economic Development Administration, they roll things along fairly quickly. And they also have a really great, for lack of a better term, onboarding process when you receive the grant. They basically give you a template of what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and it's a circular that you follow. It's really, really straightforward and an incredible resource, but not every agency will give you that type of information. Some will kind of make you fend for yourself, so it's always great to ask as many questions as you can right off the bat. And again, I included this template, but I'll also send a template for a letter of funding commitment, a letter of support, and any other template you're looking for. I can also send you a completed grant application package if you'd like to see that to refer to and kind of see what we've done in the past and what's worked. And one of the greatest, most beneficial things we do though is the debriefing with the agency after and talking to them. And like Kim said, they won't answer your questions once the notice of funding opportunity has been distributed, but they will beforehand and they will after. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, like Kim, I want to see every grant opportunity that's applied for be awarded still. So I'm happy to answer them. I'm happy to review grant packages and anything like that, any resources you need. I can try to point you in the right direction.
So now we're going to have Begita Fernandez-Smith and Brian Nouveau come up and talk about the City of Beaumont's Community Development Block Grant Program. So if y'all come up and tell us a little bit about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I'd rather not use the mic. So my name is Begita Hernandez-Smith, and this is my friend and colleague, Brian Nouveau. For those of you who don't know, we actually came off the campaign trail in May. I ran for mayor of Beaumont. Brian ran for city council at large. And so we decided that, we knew beforehand that a leader can lead with any position in any area. And so it's very important to us that we continue our plight to help our community, to help our city. So we were appointed as advisors by Councilman Getz. Councilman Getz is here. To the Community Development Advisory Committee of Beaumont as an extension to the community for city council. So very happy to be here. And we are learning, so we're new appointees and we haven't been involved in the meetings just yet. They will start next month, but we're learning in terms of understanding the facets of applying for the Cdbg Grant, so that's the Community Development Block Grants. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that we want to gingerly try and introduce a new vision to that committee, and that it's not only dedicated to the grants, but also for us to be anchors and pillars in the community to continue to develop the community in different ways as leaders in the areas of public service, social service, just being able to better our community, clean up our community, lead our community. So we'll talk to you about that as well. We will, because this session is targeted towards grant funding. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk about the nuts and bolts of this program, how to go applying, how to go about utilizing us as support in your application so that you can know the gist of it. And as we learn more, we'll be able to be kind of your support in any questions that you have additionally.
Mr. Getz. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever we are. I'm Brian Nouveau. I haven't been here in quite some time. I used to go to school here about 20 years ago. And then coming up on this campus, gosh, does it bring back some memories. Wow, time flies. I've done a lot since I've left here in 2001. I've been an entrepreneur. Started car business, went into real estate, went into the gold business, tax consulting, feathering down into retirement so I can spend the majority of my time running for office, community service, and committees like these. And so I was finishing up my campaign, went through the went through the process of the run, the door knocking, the meeting people, and just had a great time. I came runner-up, and so I decided to do it again, so I'm going to continue on with that. And Mr. Getz was nice enough to ask me if I would, be an appointee for this. And I was like, well, that would be great. I said, I'm actually starting a foundation myself, make ends meet. And so networking for single-parent families, and everything I do is wrapped around food. If you know me, I love to cook. And so I had this vision to, help the less fortunate, families, just kind of take a little time out of their day, or give them a little more time in their day by getting a commercial kitchen, make pre-made pans of food with proteins and vegetables, and just have them ready to go one day a week, and they could just come in, go home, don't have to worry about going to the store, picking up all the food, cooking it, cleaning it. You can actually spend one night a week without frantically picking the kids up from daycare, doing your homework, making all the dinner, cleaning all the stuff, doing clothes, doing, what it is, being a parent. And so I figured I'd make their life a little easy, and it had developed from there, and I wanted to do other things in the community. So we're doing movie nights in the park, Beaumont beautification projects where we clean up city streets once a month. So we're doing cooking classes for kids, teach kids how to cook. Since I never did open a restaurant, everybody's been bugging me to do it. I said, you know what, I'm just going to teach you guys how to do it. And so a bunch of different things that I'll be doing. So through my navigation of the process to get my 501c3, I was led by Chris Boone, which is overseeing this entire community development block grant, along with Joanne Patillo. If you guys have a pen, I would like you guys to write down the name Chris Boone, Joanne Patillo. So these are City of Beaumont managers of the block grants, and the phone number is 880-3178. And I guess while you guys got your pen handy, the Southeast Texas Nonprofit Development Center that we have been speaking about in here in depth, it is downtown, and there is a new appointment there. Her name is Mary Young.
She's right here behind me.
There you are.
Hi.
I thought you looked familiar. Okay, so do you mind if I give your number up?
I don't mind.
Not your personal. We're not going to go back and forth.
You were going to do it anyway.
832-6565, and I'm sure you can probably bug her any time of the day or night. I'm sure she'd be willing to help. She's helped me through my process. I don't mind giving out the numbers. It was $575 for the entire thing, and they help to steer you through the process with the IRS, get your EIN number, Secretary of State, file. You have to send some paperwork over to the comptroller, pay franchise tax or not, depending on if you do over $1 million worth of money going through your door, which I'm not sure if that's going to matter, being that it's a nonprofit. Here's the different aspects of what you guys will be looking for your grant if you choose to go through the City of Beaumont. Cdbg.
So is everyone familiar with the Cdbg grants for the city?
Okay. There's 6 areas that we cover in the mission statements: housing, economic development, public service, education, employment, and health. And this is directly from the playbook that I received from these guys. So the requirements are: the activities must benefit low and moderate income persons. They must aid in the prevention or elimination of slums and blight. Activities must meet other development needs having a particular urgency because existing conditions pose a serious and immediate threat to health or welfare of the community, and other financial resources not available to meet such needs. If you guys would look at the packets.
Yeah, so.
Yes. Yeah, I won't bore you to death with all the particulars, but I wanted to give you the nuts and bolts of it real quick. So I did hand out a little packet that I printed. Now this is the 2021 application, and I've been told that they just now updated it, or it will be within the next few days. So those, the time frame to put in your block grant starts October the 1st, all the way through February, I believe it's the 12th. And it says by 2 o'clock, they mean by 2 o'clock, 2:01, forget it. And it's just literally the laws. I mean, that's what they said. So have it in early, and what I've been told when I sat down, is the more specific that your plan is, the more specific, I mean, down to the penny. If you're wanting to lease a place, it's $1,500 a month, and you need phone lines, you need this. If you would just detail everything out, you'll have a better chance to get the grant. And so Ms. Patillo, she's the one that will be reviewing and qualifying or pre-qualifying. So when we meet, I believe it's in June, we'll be making determinations of which block grants will be chosen. We can't rubber stamp them all. And so I think it's around June, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mike?
So let me just interject for a second. So just to put this kind of in its own box. So the Cdbg Grant, first off, everything that the previous speaker spoke about in terms of making sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's is very important. For those of you who don't consider themselves naturally organized, try and get yourself organized in terms of time allocation. It seems very taxing, but I'm a proponent for time management. If you manage your time accordingly and know kind of what time you're going to devote to certain areas, the work will get done. I don't want to discourage anyone from grant funding, but it does take a lot of time. The other thing is that with Cdbg grants, because it's a new council, it's a new day, we have new advisors, we want to really be able to diversify the kind of companies that are going to be awarded. Right, so we want to make sure that we are reaching out to all of Beaumont so that all of Beaumont can understand these opportunities. Third is $20,000 cap, right? So there's a $20,000 cap on the award. However, what's very, very important, and this was mentioned before, is that it's reimbursable. So you need to make sure that in your organization, you can carry what it is that you're ultimately needing at the end of the day. Another piece of wisdom that I'd like to give to you is that when I met with Joanne Patillo, who's the manager over these grants, she talked about making sure that each expense that you're using to get with this money that you're ultimately going to get reimbursed for is naturally communicated to the impact of the community that you're targeting, right? So you want to make sure. There was an example that she gave me where I believe an organization was awarded a grant. They used the monies to purchase like some type of fencing. Well, that fencing wasn't conducive to the actual mission and objective of the organization, right? And so that person didn't get reimbursed for that piece. Nobody wants to be in that position. And so my thing is this, and just naturally, as a leader, I lead workforce development programs across our country. It's important that you ask questions throughout the process. Nobody's going to know anything. No question is stupid. It's important because I'd rather ask the same question 5 times than to be in a place where I'm anticipating some monies to fund my organization and I can't get it. I believe that those are the nuts and bolts. What's going to happen is in October, we're going to be meeting as a committee. Brian and I know each other. We don't know well, maybe some people on the committee, but we're going to come together. We're newbies. We have let's just say an enhanced vision of what we'd like to see. And as you guys know, as professionals, we can't come in and just bogart our vision, but we want to be able to build the right relationships, understand the process, understand where the committee is right now, and then be able to develop it the way we think it can for Beaumont. I think those are the nuts and bolts for the most part. You have your application. I would suggest that, and we can give our numbers out. We don't want to be a conflict of interest, so there's no way that we can coach you through it, but we can answer the very, the Q&A part, the FAQs of what the process looks like. I would say generally, anytime that you are going to be awarded anything, you make a niche for yourself. You think about other organizations that could be considered the same, but you kind of position yourself as the cutting edge. Anything that's unique, anything that encompasses technology, I think, in today's day, with COVID and the fact that, we've navigated a brand new technology platform, which we never thought we would. Anything that's unique to our times, I think will definitely get a lot of attention. Just take your time on that because we're ever changing and we're evolving as a city, as a country, as a world, and we need to make sure that we craft that niche for ourselves. Yes.
Question. On the grant, because my facility or my organization is located in Rose City, just across the border, right there in Orange County. But we serve anywhere from 40 to 60% of our clients are from the Beaumont area, depending on the year. Could we apply for this? Because we're serving that clientele, even though we're not
That's a great
located.
question. Yes, that's a great question. I need to get that information for you because, and Mike, I don't know if you know that.
I'm not
Do
sure
you know
if the
you
physical
have to be
location has to
located
be anchored in Beaumont, but I'm
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, because we didn't even go over that information, but I can get that for you. And I'll get your number and I'll get that information for you because that's a valid question. The majority of the people you serve are in Beaumont?
Not the majority, but like I say, it fluctuates from year to year. Sometimes it's about 40%, but other years it's been about 60%. So
I'm sure if you put that together in a package, they'll take it into consideration.
Yeah, and federal, and it's so true, like federal money, there's no play with federal money. I run workforce development programs. I'm currently building in North Carolina, and I've worked with Beaumont and Houston and all that, and the metrics that we have to follow, the goals that we have to adhere to, the auditing process is tremendous. So I would say, like, as a rule of thumb, be your own auditor. Don't wait for somebody to catch your mistakes. You audit yourself, however that may look for your organization.
I want to thank Christy for inviting me to share some information. Again, my name is Byron Prince. I'm the Assistant Director of Corporate Partnerships with Lamar Institute of Technology. One of the responsibilities that I have is identifying, listening, and creating training for industry. It doesn't matter what it is. If there is a need for some type of certification, my job is to create it or find it and offer it to the industry. Just to take a step back, I'm pretty sure you all know, seen, and watched how COVID affected industry last year. Complete shutdown. This gave us an opportunity to become, our department to become innovative. And when the time comes when COVID restrictions were being lifted, industry wanted to get back started with their projects. We wanted to be 5 steps ahead when that happened. So what I've done was to identify, kind of like almost become a head hunter, identify every single possible training that every industry, may it be petrochemical, may it be construction, may it be computers, to medical. I wanted to identify every single company that offers training and certifications for when the time comes when industry is saying, okay, it's a green light, we need to start hiring folks, but we need to get them refreshed on certifications and possible upskill training. So that's where we came into play, to where now I have extended quite a bit of our training catalog to where now we have over 80 types of certifications. That's not even counting the NCCER type of certifications. If you all are familiar with that, those are the most required certifications in industry. You have to have the basic NCCER level 1 just to get inside certain gates. We have levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's across the board with any type of craft, from your electrical to your millwrights to your crane operators to your rigging. And then we have the almost 30 different types of NCCO type of certifications. If you want to become a crane operator, if you're trying to do rigging, things of that nature, LIT offers that. From your, matter of fact, to the most way left field, which is not left field because you actually can make $200,000 as a 19-year-old in 6 months. We offer 40-hour safety certification courses. That particular certification is kind of like your golden ticket into the field of field inspector checking welds for radiation levels. A 19-year-old with that ticket can make $200,000 their first year in 6 months. We offer that. Nobody takes advantage of it. Now, I'm kind of shifting the mindset from the business, and I did a presentation over there to the nonprofit where you all are most needed. The other responsibility that I do have is keeping my ears to the ground in this area. sitting down with pastors, sitting down with local leaders, sitting down with industry. One of the key things that I'm pretty sure you all have heard, industry doesn't hire local. They can't pass a drug test. They don't know how to come to work. We've heard that. This is where you all come into play. What I've shared with you is a list of grants by Texas workforce that in this area, no one has touched. This is free money. And not as stringent on the requirements as a federal grant. One of the things that I'm going to focus on is what you call the Self-Sufficiency Grant, which is listed at the bottom of the first page, I believe. This particular grant can go up to $500,000 to your nonprofit. One of the key things about this is that you have to offer once you're approved, your curriculum your training has to lead to a certification that leads into a certain industry. It doesn't matter what it is. Also, too, the reason why I say you all are most important, the biggest thing that we need around here is life skills training. Life skills is pretty much the most simplest curriculum, but yet very little in this area is being offered for that. This is where you all come into play. To make this even a little bit easier, the question is, well, how do we offer craft certifications? This is where LIT comes into play. Simply partner with us. We can provide that particular training since you have a budget, and that budget goes up to $500,000. Each person in your organization, trainee, receives $1,200. That's free. So, basically, in a nutshell, you start off identifying 16 people from the community. How you identify them? You go to the local barbershops. You go to your local church. You talk to the ministers. Those are the people that you start to identify, that untapped targeted population. You identify those individuals. You've already identified a curriculum to say, we're going to provide her with life skills. We're going to teach you how to wake up 2 hours before your job and not 15 minutes. No, I do that sometimes.
I always do that.
That snooze button is 8 o'clock, I'm not supposed to be at work. But anyway, that happens. But, you know, you teach them waking up at appropriate time, how to handle conflict resolution with a boss, calling in sick, how to handle child care if something happens. If you get a flat tire, who do you call? Do you have backup? That's what you call life skills. Being able to survive the basic things before you start getting into the workforce. This is where this money comes into play at. Yes, ma'am.
So that's a fantastic idea, but what I find, because I do get a bunch of my employees from the university, is that even the students don't have these, even though they are the more responsible ones. Some of these basic conversational skills, some of those basic things that you just mentioned, they are your A students, they are your hardcore, your ones you will still probably go to, but they don't have the basic skills. They can't have conversations, they can't request time off, they are scared to call in because they're sick. They, just basic stuff that I feel like a different generation, we learned in somewhere.
It's a different type of generation.
Yes, they don't have adults.
It's a different type of generation, but I know at one time, I know LIT Student Services actually is starting to create programs to where they can provide orientation for students. To teach, matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up because they even offer interviewing dress rehearsals. Yeah. I knew it was something. Well, they bring in actual representatives from the industry. And they do mock type of interviews. So yes, we offer that type of training.
Should be after you get the job.
That should be, well, before.
Oh, well, this is the things you should know.
Right, before, because again, it's a different type of generation. You know, we were told without any visuals. We just did. We were told.
Yes.
So now these young individuals have to see what you're talking about. And not to veer off, they need to see how much money they're going to make versus us, we just know that we're gonna make some type of money. So, LIT does offer that. Matter of fact, twice a year, again, and they actually critique, you know, your whole interviewing style, what you need to do, how to dress, things of nature. But jumping back to the main focus of you all, this is where you all come into play because, again, I sit down with industry almost every day. And it's the same gripe. Sometimes I don't believe it, but sometimes I do. They can't find local workers. And they were saying, well, Byron, where are the local workers at? I'm sitting there like, well, they're here, but you hear this other one like, well, we tried to hire, but they'll go a couple of days of work and then quit. But without the proper skill and guidance from you all, who have the experience, who have the guidance, you all can provide those type of life skills and sit down with them to make this happen. Also too, to not carry the load on your shoulder. This is where, and I learned this technique in Chicago, that old school bartering. You may have a service, but do not have the clients. She may have those clients. This is where you all combine together under that grant to say, I'm gonna send my people over for those services. You don't have to carry the burden by yourself. This is where you all partner yourselves and offer yourselves to provide some type of training or service. You don't have to carry that burden by yourself. What we call it in Chicago, we call it a wraparound service. Somebody in here offers something unique that they can offer to the core of the purpose of the grant. You have $500,000. No one in this area, let me repeat again, no one in this area has taken advantage of it. Churches in Houston, I count off the top of my head 15 churches who are on their third cycle of funding. Again, once you start the process, 9 times out of 10, they will contact me and say, Byron, we have an organization in your area that's looking to do skills, self-sufficiency fund grant. You will actually have, if you want to call it, since we're on the campus, you will have an instructor that's going to guide you through the grant process. You're not going to be doing this alone. They're going to tell you exactly, you need this, let me help you with this, don't add this, keep this, until it's completed, and they will hand guide you until it's fully completed. And again, identifying type of trainings, that's where you come in with us. You sit down with me like, hey, what do you all offer? Can we offer this? We got it. But no one is taking advantage of it. Just like on the other side, I offer another grant through the Texas Workforce, which is the first one, the Skills Development Fund. It's $45 million TWC offers for the whole state of Texas. TWC barely can spend $20 million for the state of Texas. No one in this area until last year applied for this grant in the last 15 years. It just sits there. It's for companies, and it gives every company employee $2,000 each. This is free. It doesn't matter how many people in your company. As a nonprofit, this is where you work with opportunities with the company to say, hey, we got 5 individuals that's been through life skills training, been through NCCER training, they're certified, I need you to hire them. They have no excuse because now you have leverage. So again, I want you all to really sit down. You can go to Texas Workforce, the website is at the bottom. I want you to go to that website and read up on the Self-Sufficiency Grant. And again, it's free. And let me just say this, you can, I don't care if TWC calls me out on this or not. TWC sits on a boat, crap load of money, and I don't know how many ways. I just told you $45 million. Workforce Solutions local sits on more than that. Nobody takes advantage of it. Also too, on a side note, based upon income, there are numerous certifications that Workforce Solutions will pay for, such as your CDLs. If you know anybody in your organization that's trying to get on their feet, don't have the financial means, have them go to Workforce Solutions. If they want to be a CDL right now, there's 400,000 empty CDL seats. Desperate. Like I said again, I sit down with industry. They can't find workers, especially with CDL. A company called MPW right there in Port Arthur. $60,000 a year, and you're home by 5 o'clock. You do regional travel. Another company on 69, they were like a 20-year-old can make $115,000 a year and be home by 5 o'clock. But the problem is that life skills component is that key. This is where you all come in. You got to share with these young people that, as my coach used to say, you got to die before you get to heaven. They used to hurt my nerve. I just want to reap the heaven benefits, but I don't want to. Anyway, so again, I wanted to share some information with you all about these grants that are available and actually a little bit easier and tangible to do. Keep in mind again that Self-Sufficiency Grant, you will be assigned to an actual person that will guide you through that grant. And I'm telling you, it's very simplified, it's easy. Don't fry your brain because what you're trying to do has already been done. So if you need a life skills type of curriculum, somebody's already doing it. All you need to do is find out and get their curriculum and modify it.